a land without water, the sky a sheet of bronze. For 3 long years, not a single drop of rain had fallen on the kingdom of Israel. Rivers turned to dust. Livestock withered into bone. The people's prayers to their new god Baal were met with only a silent burning sun. King Ahab ruled from his ivory palace, but even he could not command the clouds. His queen, Jezebel, had brought Baal to this land, and with him, a curse. She promised Baal was the god of storms and fertility. Yet the land was barren, and the heavens were sealed shut. Where was the god of the storm? Then a man appeared, a man who seemed to emerge from the wilderness itself. His name was Elijah. He walked with the authority of one who spoke for a power far older than kings and their idols. He was a prophet of Yahweh, the forgotten God of Israel. Elijah went straight to the desperate King Ahab. He did not bow. He did not plead. He delivered a simple, terrifying message. "There will be neither dew nor rain," he declared, "except by my word." And then he vanished. For 3 years, his prophecy held the nation hostage. Famine gripped the kingdom, and the people starved, caught between a silent God and an invisible one. But a prophecy is not just a warning. It is a countdown, and time was running out. Elijah reappeared, his face weathered by the wild. He sought out the king again, this time with a challenge that would shake the foundations of the kingdom. "How long will you waver between 2 opinions?" Elijah's voice cut through the despair. "If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." The people, starved and broken, remained silent. Fear had stolen their voices. Who could they trust? So Elijah proposed a test, a public contest on the peak of Mount Carmel. A final, undeniable answer to the question, who is the true God? The terms were simple. 2 altars, 2 bulls for sacrifice, but no fire. The God who answered by fire, he is God. King Ahab, seeing no other way to end the drought, agreed. He summoned Jezebel's chosen ones, 450 prophets of Baal. He also summoned the people of Israel. They were to be the witnesses. They would see for themselves which God held the power of life and death. Mount Carmel became a stage for the greatest spiritual battle in the nation's history. On one side, 450 prophets in elaborate robes. On the other, one man in simple garments. The prophets of Baal took their bull first. They prepared their altar with practiced ritual, their confidence high. They were the king's chosen. As the sun began its climb, they started their incantation. "O Baal, answer us!" They cried, their voices echoing across the mountain. But there was no answer. Only the wind and the silence of a cloudless sky. They began to dance, a rhythmic, hypnotic movement around the altar. Their chants grew louder, more desperate. "O Baal, answer us!" Midday arrived. The sun beat down without mercy. Sweat poured from their bodies. Their voices grew hoarse. Still, nothing. Elijah watched them. He let them exhaust themselves. He let the people see the emptiness of their ritual. Then he began to speak, his voice laced with sharp irony. "Shout louder." He mocked. "Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping," Elijah taunted, "and must be awakened." His words were like salt in their wounds. Goaded by his mockery, the prophets fell into a frenzy. They drew swords and spears, slashing themselves until blood flowed freely. This was their custom. They believed their pain and their blood would awaken their God's power. They limped and screamed around the altar, a horrifying spectacle of devotion. Yet, despite their blood, their cries, and their manic dance, there was no voice. No one answered. No one paid attention. The sun began to set on their failure. Their hope was draining away with the light. Was anyone listening? As their last cries faded into whimpers, Elijah finally stepped forward. "Come here to me," he said to the people. His voice was calm, deliberate. The exhausted crowd gathered around him. He began to work, not with frantic energy, but with purpose. He found the ruins of an old, forgotten altar to Yahweh. He rebuilt it, using 12 stones, one for each of the tribes of Israel. This was not just a sacrifice. It was an act of remembrance. He was reminding the people of who they were and the God they had abandoned. Every stone was a piece of their history. Then he did something that made no sense. In the middle of a catastrophic drought, he asked for water. "Fill 4 large jars with water," he commanded, and poured on the offering and on the wood. They obeyed. The precious water soaked the sacrifice, the wood, and ran down the stones of the altar. It seemed like an act of madness. "Do it again," Elijah said. They poured another 4 jars. The water pooled at the base of the altar. "Do it a 3rd time," he insisted. They poured the last 4 jars. Now the offering was completely drenched. The trench around the altar was full to the brim. There was no doubt now. No trickery. No hidden flame could possibly survive this. He had made the miracle impossible for man. All fell silent. The setting sun cast long shadows across the mountain. The air was thick with anticipation. Elijah stepped toward the drenched altar. He did not shout. He did not dance or cut himself. He simply prayed. "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel," he began, his voice clear and steady. "Let it be known today that you are God in Israel. Let it be known that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command." His prayer was a quiet conversation. "Answer me, Lord, answer me," he pleaded, "so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then it happened. The fire of the Lord fell from a cloudless sky. It was not a spark, but a pillar of flame. It consumed the sacrifice. It consumed the wood. It consumed the 12 stones of the altar itself. The fire even licked up the dust and the water that had filled the trench. In an instant, it was all gone, vaporized. A collective gasp swept through the crowd, followed by a terrified silence. They had seen the impossible. They fell face down on the ground, a wave of bodies hitting the earth. Their fear turned into a single unified cry. "The Lord, He is God!" They shouted, their voices shaking with awe and terror. "The Lord, He is God!" The question had been answered, not by a whisper, but by a torrent of divine fire. But the day was not over. A verdict had been delivered, and a sentence had to be carried out. "Seize the prophets of Baal," Elijah commanded, his voice ringing with authority. "Don't let a single one get away." The people, their faith instantly and violently restored, obeyed without hesitation. They captured all 450 prophets. Elijah took them down to the Kishon Valley. There, justice for their deception and the years of famine was swift and final. The false prophets who had led the nation astray would never do so again. A terrible price was paid to cleanse the land. But one problem remained. The sky was still clear. The drought was not yet broken. The fire was a sign, not the solution. Elijah turned to the stunned King Ahab. "Go, eat and drink," he said, "for there is the sound of a heavy rain." Ahab heard nothing. He saw nothing, but he had just seen fire fall from heaven. He did not argue with the prophet. While Ahab went to his tent, Elijah climbed higher up the mountain to the very peak of Carmel. He went alone. He crouched down to the ground, putting his face between his knees. He began to pray again, not for fire, but for water. He sent his servant to look out toward the sea. "Go and look," he said. The servant went and returned. "There is nothing," the servant reported. The horizon was empty. Elijah remained in prayer. "Go back," he said. 7 times he sent his servant. 6 times the answer was the same. "There is nothing." The sky remained stubbornly clear. But on the 7th time, the servant returned with a flicker of hope in his voice. A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea. That was all Elijah needed to hear. A sign, a promise. Go and tell Ahab. Elijah ordered his servant, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. The king must have thought him mad. A tiny cloud was no storm. But he obeyed. And in a short time, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind began to howl, kicking up the dust of the dry earth. The sound that Elijah had heard in faith was now a physical roar. The atmosphere shifted. Hope returned to the air. Then, the first drop of rain fell. Then another. And another. Soon, a heavy downpour drenched the thirsty land. The curse was broken. The famine was over. King Ahab raced his chariot toward his palace in Jezreel, trying to outrun the storm. The rain fell in sheets. The power of the Lord came on Elijah. He tucked his cloak into his belt and ran ahead of Ahab's chariot all the way to the city gates. He was a messenger of the storm, a man fueled by divine energy. The prophet had outrun the king's horses. Ahab arrived at the palace, soaked and shaken. He told his queen, Jezebel, everything that had happened. He told her about the contest. He told her about the fire from heaven. And he told her how Elijah had executed all of her prophets. Jezebel listened. But she was not filled with fear or awe. She was filled with a cold, murderous rage. This was not a defeat in her eyes. It was a declaration of war. Elijah had taken her gods and her prophets. Now, she would take his life. She sent a messenger to find the prophet. The message was not a secret threat. It was a sworn public oath. May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, her message read. If by this time tomorrow, I do not make your life like that of one of them. It was a death sentence, to be carried out in 24 hours. Elijah, the man who had stood down a king and 450 prophets, the man who had called down fire from heaven, heard this message, and he was afraid. The spiritual victory on the mountain was immediately followed by a terrifyingly human emotion. He had faced down an army of prophets, but the threat from one single ruthless woman sent him running for his life. He fled into the wilderness, leaving his servant behind. He ran until he could run no more. He collapsed under a solitary broom tree, exhausted in body and spirit. The great prophet was now a fugitive. I have had enough, Lord, he prayed in despair. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. The hero of Mount Carmel wished for death. His greatest victory had led him to his lowest point. He had won the battle for God's honor, but now he was alone, hunted, and hopeless. How could such a powerful high be followed by such a crushing low? Was the fight ever truly over? The fire on Carmel proved who was God, but it did not solve the problem of evil in the human heart. Jezebel's power was not broken. Her resolve was only strengthened. Her hatred was now focused on one man. Elijah's journey was far from over. The fire was just the beginning. Now he had to face the queen. God had proven himself to the people, but the rulers of the land still clung to their idols and their power. The conflict was no longer a public spectacle. It was about to become a personal war between a vengeful queen and a hunted prophet. A war of whispers and shadows, of political power against divine authority, and only one could survive. Elijah's escape into the desert was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of a new, more difficult test of faith. For after the fire and after the rain comes the whisper of God in the silence, and a mission that would change the destiny of nations. What happens when a prophet must face a queen alone?